Vans. They're big, they can fit a lot of stuff in them, and a lot of companies use them as their main vehicles for getting in and around cities. But where did they come from and how long have they been there? Well, vans are one of the oldest segments in the automotive industry, even predating the internal combustion engine. Vans and their form and in the sense of carrying a multitude of cargo have been around for nearly 200 years. Yes, today, AutoLooks is going to take a look at the history of vans. Welcome back to the AutoLooks podcast. I'm your host, as always, the doctor to the automotive industry, Mr. Everett J, coming to you from our main host website at AutoLooks.net. If you haven't been there, stop by, check it out, read some of the ratings, check out some of the reviews, and stop by our Corporate Links website page. Big or small, we have them all. Car companies from around the globe, all on the Corporate Links website page. The AutoLooks podcast is brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbeam.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@autolooks.net, or send us a comment or share us through any of the main streaming sites or social feeds that you've found the AutoLooks website or AutoLooks podcast on, all from autolooks.net. So like I said in the beginning, vans. Love them, hate them, doesn't really matter. We all have our preference, but what if I told you that vans are one of the oldest and most useful forms of the automobile in history, and they've been around a lot longer than sedans, station wagons, and even pickup trucks. Yes, vans, as you may think about it, may seem a little crazy, but they've been around a lot longer than you really think. Vans have essentially been around since the days of the stagecoach, and due to their intake volume and being one of the most useful forms of transportation on the market, vans made it a lot easier for us to store products and bring them from place to place. Think back to the original stagecoaches and how much product you could fit inside of it and move across country. Hell, it's essentially how the West got settled. Stagecoaches, or in a sense, the caravan of stagecoaches, which brought people across from the eastern seaboard to the western seaboard in the United States and even in Canada. Without that, we wouldn't have been able to get there. We wouldn't have been able to bring all of our products with us. We had to fit it all inside of one mass structure situated on top of wheels. So as you've probably noticed, that AutoLooks really isn't into vans. We rate them, we talk about them, but they're big, they're bulky. There's not a lot of great van products out there that we really like. Sure, in the form of quality, they're out there, but in form of design, vans have never been there. They've only served one main purpose, and that is actually starting to change into the world of today. But going back to the original stagecoaches, our humble beginning, and one that lived an illustrious life, being that it is one of the only automotive products that has barely even evolved over the decades that it has existed. Sure, today vans take on a different form than the original stagecoaches, but their main purpose is still there. One door at the back to access all of the product within inside the confines of a mass space. It's all there. And stagecoaches form the same basis of what vans would eventually become. They're the ones that brought products in and around town. They delivered our milk. They brought us the newspaper. They delivered goods from store to store. But how did the term van come around? Well, that actually happened in 1829. The original term was coined in 1829 when traveling in a caravan. One single stagecoach broke away. It was starting to be known as just a van. Instead of a caravan, it was just a van on its own. This was a term that would eventually carry on to the automobile industry. Now, vans per se didn't exist at the very beginning of the automobile industry because we still had stagecoaches and used a horse and buggy system to do deliveries within the confines of city areas and even across country. Automobile was just a form of leisure for the rich and the famous. But as the automobile industry started to take off in the early part of the 20th century, the addition of more models came out. And with it, we started looking at ways to bring things around and taking our original stagecoach outline and putting it onto an internal combustion engine. We eventually had the very first vans. This also helped to create the very first pickup trucks and the very first buses. But vans being utilized as still more of a horse and buggy style layout to bring products in and around the confines of the city. Now, eventually, vans would be better utilized to bring cargo between cities. Much like the railway was at the beginning of the 20th century, we used that to bring products from major city to major city, but vans were still utilized within the inner confines of those major cities, even in from major cities to smaller communities on the outskirts. Vans were an easier way to bring smaller amounts of products from place to place, and with that came the milkman. The milkman became one of the original people to utilize a van as a dedicated delivery vehicle, followed up quickly by the mail service, where the mail service, including of companies like Western Union, they utilized stagecoaches to bring product between place to place, similar to that of the mail service. Mail service was put onto trains, but between small towns, even in the Western society, where the original caravans and the original term for vans was created, they utilized small van-style vehicles. Now, vans in the early part of the automobile industry were essentially more of sedans with a cargo rear end. They were made for just making deliveries in and around cities. Now, as the times had changed and we started to move into World War I and the pre-World War I world, we found ourselves wanting to move more product in and around town. The Roaring 20s and even the Dirty 30s gave rise to more and more usage out of the van industry. We needed it to move even more product and even more people. Now, vans weren't being utilized for transportation units yet, but if you go back to the original stagecoaches, yes, in a sense they were, as the original school buses were still being used as stagecoaches, where vans would eventually pick up that marketplace. But this really wouldn't start taking off until the end of World War II. Vans managed to make the transition over from the stagecoach industry, where their name was originally created by a single-use caravan person on the move. If you weren't part of a caravan, you were just a van. And as the van market moved into the automobile industry, we got more utilization within the inner confines of the city and small town bases. But now, it's the end of World War II, and the world is growing. The world wants more, and we need more products delivered, and we need more products on the move. Well, by this time, we have managed to figure out how to build even bigger transport trucks. Where original pickup trucks with long beds allowed us to move products in and around town, the transport trucks that came out into the 50s and even early 40s helped to move product across a brand new highway system that was being developed. The limited access freeways and their explosion between the 1950s and 1970s gave rise to more usage out of what you would call the transport industry. Well, what were vans to be used here? Vans were originally used to just transport product between small towns and inner cities. Well, big transports still couldn't navigate small, old-school roads. We're talking about going into old, small towns in Europe that have been around for centuries and essentially were set up for people walking or horses. Our vans could be better utilized in those climates, where the transports can only do deliveries between major city to major city, or what was now growing, the suburban life. Well, the suburban life also brought a new need for the van industry. And again, the milkman and mailman moved out into the suburbs and started doing more deliveries by utilizing dedicated built vehicles. Yes, they weren't just standard vans. They were dedicated cargo units made to deliver all the products that people wanted in the new suburbs outside of the city. So as we started moving out of the city and didn't require as much product being delivered in the inner city, then why did we need vans? Well, vans started growing and the marketplace started seeing a need for them. They could be utilized for going camping. They could be utilized for bringing larger families, which are now starting to happen during the baby boom days. And Volkswagen gave us the microbus. The Type 2 microbus essentially helped pave the way for the new minivan era, which wouldn't arise for another 30 years, but was in its infancy in the 1950s. Being utilized by people who wanted to save some money and buy something a little more versatile for city life, but still have the ability to bring themselves and a multitude of people or just go camping outside of the city. Vans were starting to breathe a new life into their marketplace by being better utilized for more uses. Whereas the world loved station wagons, vans were still there, and people, including bands, needed a van. With the growing industry in both movie and music, vans were becoming better utilized for the movement of their product, not just themselves. And by the 1960s, people started realizing that trying to throw everything into a station wagon or a sedan and go to a gig really wasn't as easy as owning an actual van. Vans were easier. And with the addition of sliding doors on the side as opposed to hinge doors, things just got a whole lot easier to get in and out of. The van market was moving and it was growing, but it still wasn't one of the biggest ones out there. People still looked at vans similar to they do today. They're made for the movement of cargo goods, and that's it. We utilize them to pick up and drop off stuff in the city. But as the marketplace changed and the aftermarket industry started moving its way in, the big cargo vans of the 1960s soon gave way for the aftermarket industry vans of the 1970s. If you remember The Simpsons, and I can use the reference from The Simpsons for just about everything we talk about because there's so many episodes and so many years of it. One of the early seasons, Homer's talking about people not wanting you to be around. You see him in a field, and there's these guys hooking up a strobe light. They say hello to the second base mobile, and then the music's playing and the strobe light's going. You see Homer getting closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden he's way back. Well, what does this have to do with vans? That was a custom van. It had a waterbed, a strobe light, a mini bar, shag carpeting. The 70s were starting to showcase that vans could be cooler than just bringing you milk at your house. Vans, and in this sense, large cargo vans were becoming big money. And through the 70s and 80s, large cargo vans became a big thing. Lots of people wanted them, and they wanted them because you can essentially live inside your van. You can go out and see all kinds of concerts. Going to Woodstock with a whole bunch of your friends and bringing your van, opening up the doors and being able to live inside your van and outside your van at a concert venue was amazing. And with bigger and bigger concert venues showing up and a lot more outdoor ones, people started looking at the van market and asking themselves, what can we do? We can utilize these things to have even cooler stuff in. Now, my dad even had a van with a bed in the back of it. I had an uncle with a van. I always thought it was kind of weird because besides his kids playing hockey, they really didn't have a use for a giant cargo van. But the aftermarket industry really exploded, and even the custom industry met some from the actual automobile industry. Dodge actually had a custom van in the 1970s, straight off the production line. People wanted these vans, and you gotta remember, vans back in the 1970s still had big block V8s. So they were still powerful, and yet they were still cool. You could live at your parents' house and essentially have your own living room on wheels. This is something that we see a lot of today. And with car shows like Van Stock showcasing to us the amazing things you can do with cargo vans. Lots of people even today understand that vans aren't just for the movement of products. They can be for fun as well. And into the 80s, sure, the station wagons were still kicking around, but larger cargo vans being utilized for more passenger movement. The large families in the 1980s were looking at more cargo vans to move their families around because they still had the power to be able to move them around, and they could tow with it. And you could store a lot of stuff. And, well, let's just say that one of the few vehicles out there you can actually fit 12 people inside of a cargo van. I remember reading material at a Chrysler dealership in my hometown when I was young. My dad was looking at a truck, and I pulled out some of the information about the brand new Ram vans and all of the different variations and all the different types of seating. How they even had some with tables inside of them, with big captain chairs and plush seating, wood paneling on the walls, like all of this stuff right from the factory. They were basically giving you a living room on wheels. They're making it comfortable for you to get in and around in. But the large cargo van industry wouldn't stick around forever. And in 1983, an idea that was originally pitched to Ford was used to save Chrysler Corporation. The Caravan hit the marketplace and helped spawn the original minivan industry. The microbus was essentially the original minivan, but the Caravan is the one that built the market around the world. It's the original minivan, or MPV as you might know of them in Europe. People might tell you the Renault E-Space is one of the originals, but it's not. The minivan came came about with the Caravan, which is kind of funny because the Caravan is where the original van name comes from. And it's not the fact that is it a car, is it a van? It's a Caravan. Yeah, no, it's not. It's a van. With the introduction of the minivan, the family sedan, and even the family station wagon were getting kicked to the curb. And from the 80s and into the 90s, the minivan reigned supreme. Cargo vans were still there and still utilized for even larger families. So people that had more than 4 children would usually get a cargo van to move them in and around. But cargo vans now were being more utilized for their original context of just the movement of goods and services, along with passenger delivery vehicles. Hell, airports still use them to this day, but not as much as they like to use miniature buses. Vans, especially the cargo vans, were taking a back seat. But they're just vans. And as the minivan market exploded onto the world, with every type of variation of them, and every major automobile manufacturer making one, vans were becoming big. But all that would change in the mid-90s with the introduction of the replacement for the Bronco 2. The new Ford Explorer was showcasing to us that vans were a family vehicle and SUVs were the fun family vehicle. By the early 2000s, the SUV craze was in full force, and vans were starting to disappear. Even with the introduction of the compact van market, with the Mazda 5 in North America, the van market was starting to take a back seat. Sure, they were easier to get into and out of, you could bring a lot more people, and they were a lot more fuel efficient than their SUV counterparts. But vans were so taboo. They were suburbanized transportation. That's what your parents drove. We don't drive what our parents drive. We drive SUVs. But in the early 2000s, we started calling SUVs the dad minivan. And the reason for that is dads didn't like driving minivans. Hell, a lot of moms didn't like driving minivans. And the minivan market started to disappear. But even as it disappeared, and a lot of car companies got out of building vans, that all would change with the introduction of 2 things. 1, ride-hailing services, and 2, home delivery. By the 2010s and into the 2020s, cargo vans are being utilized for their original purpose again. They're being utilized for the goods and services, but they're also being utilized for autonomous delivery vehicles. The van market has started to explode again, and with more and more companies looking into building new van models for the future, all because people have the ability to work from home, to have all of their products delivered. Companies like Amazon are pouring tons of money into the development of brand new vans. Hell, Rivian exists in its context due to the fact that it made a major sale to Amazon for its own cargo vans. Amazon's dedicated cargo vans are Rivian vans. But when you think of Rivian, you don't think of vans. You think of their SUV and their truck. But no, Rivian builds cargo vans. Over the past 5 years, we've seen a mass influx in the amount of vans hitting the market. And this is all due to the fact that we need to get more and more products delivered at home. But in Asian markets, we've also seen an increase in both premium and luxury minivans as well, something that barely existed in the past 100 years. Before that, vans were just used for the movement of products. Even in the 90s, when the minivan industry blew up, Buick and Chrysler were one of the few premium style minivans out there with no major luxury minivans whatsoever until Mercedes gave us the Maybach V-Class. Nowadays, you can find a Buick Avenir or even a Lexus minivan. Vans have grown up and they're getting bigger. And it's not a marketplace that has disappeared. You may think the minivan was dead in the North American marketplace and replaced by SUVs and CUVs. But with the addition of all-wheel drive systems and our needs and demands for delivery of products right to our doorstep, the need for more and more cargo vans is here. And we're right at the forefront of a new explosion upon the van marketplace. One that hasn't been seen since the 1970s. Vans are still here. Whether you like it or not, vans are one of the most common vehicles you'll ever see or find. They're not just made for your plumber who comes and fixes your house. They're not just made for the Amazon delivery person. They're not made to chauffeur you around. Vans are made for all of that. And with an aftermarket industry that's massive in not only Japan, but also in North America with van stocks all around the world, vans are still here and there's still a market that people love. There's so many great things you can do with it. And why? Because it's one of the biggest interior spaces you'll find in the automobile industry whatsoever. Vans are here, and whether you like them or not, they'll always be here, because vans serve one main purpose to the automobile industry that will never change, and that is the demand for products to be delivered. Until the day the products can be transported directly into our homes, the van will be here. And in the future, will the original caravan come back with a multitude of vans? Will vans only be utilized on a singular basis? That's something we're going to have to take a look at for the future. So if you like this podcast, please like, share, or comment about it on any of the major social feeds or streaming sites that you've found the AutoLooks podcast on. And if you like what you hear, click the like button at the bottom. Follow us, like us, share us, do whatever you want. Just let us know how we're doing and let the world know about what we're talking about and what we're showcasing to the world, all from the AutoLooks podcast. And after that, stop by the website, check out some of the ratings, check out some of the reviews, and go to the Corporate Links website page. Like we said, big or small, we have them all. Corporate links to every major automobile manufacturer that you can find in the world, all from the AutoLooks.net website. The AutoLooks podcast has been brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbeam.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@AutoLooks.net. So for myself, Everett J, the AutoLooks.net team here, strap yourself in for this one fun, wild ride that the van market is going to take us on.